Welcome back to the channel. This is 20 Storm and you are watching ninth and final part of What If Naruto Was Forgotten Son of Minato. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Office of the Hokage. Tsunade rubbed her brow while staring at Shio and Menma. She was still having trouble believing Menma was Naruto's replacement. They couldn't be more dissimilar from a cosmetic standpoint. Whereas Naruto in her dimension was bright and energetic, this Naruto was cold and intelligent. So you were fighting Madara Uchiha, who was attempting to use his temporary infinite Tsukuyomi, but something went wrong and you both ended up in this dimension, she said, shaking her head. Shio nodded. It may sound difficult to believe, Lady Tsunade, but it is true. Oh, I believe you. You are not the first dimensional traveler, Tsunade snorted. Oh? Has anyone else appeared in this dimension? Menma inquired. Tsunade nodded. Yes, Minato Namikaze was just here 2 weeks ago. Shio's eyes widened. Even she had begun to lose hope that her father was still alive. Is this our Minato? He vanished during the battle with Pain.
That sounds like the Minato who appeared here, and he also described you two to me, so I can safely assume this Minato is from your dimension, Tsunade said.
For the first time since the fight with Pain, Shio felt relieved. Despite everything that had happened, she mourned for her father. They had a chance to return home with her father now that they had found him. Do you know where he is? She asked Tsunade. Tsunade nodded. Yes, the last time I spoke with him, he was on his way to Training Ground 7 with our Naruto. You may go there. I will notify the Anbu that you are allowed in the village. Shio nodded, and they both made their way to the training grounds. 7th Training Ground. Minato stood next to his other son, demonstrating his Rasen Shuriken. It was a fantastic jutsu. Shio, he knew, could do something similar by manipulating the wind around the Rasengan. Instead, Naruto was combining a Rasengan with wind chakra, resulting in an entirely different and more devastating effect. He was very proud of this version of his son, but it saddened him that his son had been forced to grow up alone even in this dimension. He was about to ask Naruto how he created the jutsu when he heard a voice in the distance call out, "Father." He turned and widened his eyes to see his daughter running to him with a happy expression on her face. How is this possible? Minato exclaimed as he embraced his daughter. The Akatsuki attacked us. One of their attacks apparently malfunctioned, and instead of sending us to an illusionary world, it sent us to an alternate dimension, Menma said as he approached the embracing father and daughter duo. Other old man, who are they? Said the local Naruto before Minato could respond. Naruto, these are my children in my dimension, Shio, and your alternate Naruto who goes by Menma, Minato said to the blonde Naruto. Wow. It's really cool to meet you. Do you like ramen? Do you know awesome jutsu? How is Ichiraku's in your dimension? Naruto exclaimed. Shio's eyes lit up at the mention of ramen and Ichiraku's, and he quickly launched into a ramen discussion. He meets himself and his sister from a different dimension, and the first thing he asks is how the ramen is in his universe. Menma stood off to the side and felt a small sweat drop on the back of his head. He stared at their conversation as they debated the benefits of ramenism, or belief in the ramen god, in great detail. Menma felt a cloud of shadow cover him and lamented, I am a happy-go-lucky idiot in this dimension. Behind him, the two blondes continued to talk, oblivious to the emotional turmoil they were causing Menma. Naruto turned to the two former siblings after nearly 30 minutes of ramen zealotry and asked, have you both signed the Toad contract? I have, Shio said with a smile, but Menma signed the spider contract. Spiders. Gross. Shivered Naruto. Spiders are not gross, they are worthy warriors and deserve respect, Menma said sharply to Naruto. But why didn't you sign the Toad contract? Dad and perverted sage both signed it, Naruto frowned. Minato and Shio both winced and looked at Menma with guilty expressions. Menma simply sighed, because of unresolved issues, I did not want to remain in my father's shadow, so I broke away from Minato's family and became my own person. Minato lowered his gaze to the ground, relieved that his son and he had reached an agreement. But he always wished he could have done more for his one and only son. Naruto's heart ached when he saw this universe. Naruto was a much happier, if less intelligent, character without him. It really brought home how much he ruined his son's childhood. Only Menma's determination kept him from becoming another Orochimaru or Madara. He looked up and saw Naruto arguing with Menma about the value of friends and family. He smiled slightly, as if Naruto was performing the friendship jutsu, described to him by Tsunade and Sakura. Flashback. Minato and his Hokage counterpart Tsunade were drinking sake and talking about various topics. I am surprised how different this Naruto is. He has had such a hard past yet can smile so openly and have such a free spirit. I wish my Naruto could smile like that, a slightly tainted Minato said. Our Naruto is pretty messed up too, Tsunade snorted into her drink. Did you know he made friends with a near-emotionless Avenger, redeemed a mad Jinchuriki, saved multiple nations, and redeemed more than 10 criminals with words alone? Minato blinked, slightly taken aback by this information. He was regarded as one of the greatest negotiators of his time, but he had never done anything of the sort. Yep. That kid can make friends with everyone. All he has to do is fight them with his friendship speech and he will worm his way into any heart. That will make him a great Hokage someday, I'm sure, Tsunade continued after a long drink from her sake. Minato sighed, looking at his reflection in his sake saucer. Despite not being as strong or intelligent as his children, Naruto in this dimension is amazing. He wondered if he had supported his son, if he would have been just as wonderfully lighthearted in his own world. He could only speculate. Flashback concludes. Menma frowned at the situation across from Naruto. Naruto had challenged him to a fight after they had argued about the importance of family. Do we have to do this, Naruto? You can't win as you are, he sighed as he began pouring his non-fatal toxins onto his fingers. Naruto cracked his knuckles and made a ram sign with his fingers, and the training field was covered in a huge plume of smoke by over 1,000 Naruto clones. He frowned and stretched his chakra into a web, connecting one tendril to each clone, before folding his arms and waiting for them to attack. Naruto snarled at his rival's arrogance. The bastard reminded him far too much of Sasuke for his liking. He mentally commanded all of his clones to attack, each yelling their own war cry as they charged the stationary raven-haired man, not caring that he had called a version of himself a bastard. Menma spread his arms wide and hung them loosely. Small scythes protruded from his arms behind his sleeves. As the Narutos converged on him, he spun around quickly, his scythes rapidly expanding and slaying hundreds of the blondes around him. He decided to use the trump card he created at the start of the fight as more clones attacked. Every clone around him popped as the paralyzing toxin coursed through him, channeling his toxins through his web. As he observed the training field, the spider summoner frowned. He couldn't find the original, and he couldn't detect him with his web. As a massive surge of senjutsu chakra emerged from the forest, he widened his eyes. He quickly began absorbing more senjutsu by encircling himself with his chakra web. The key to spider senjutsu is that you can move while absorbing chakra, but you must remain connected to your chakra web. The more complicated the web, the faster sage chakra can be drawn in. He quickly absorbed enough senjutsu to empower his body because he had connected his web through nearly 1,000 clones. He removed his arms from the sleeves and exposed his chest as his shirt hung below his waist before the spider limbs could destroy it. 4 spider limbs protruded from his back, and he took a stance with his arm sides and bladed appendages. Naruto emerged from the forest, 2 Rasengan spiraling in his palms. To defend against the twin orbs, Menma twisted his sides, and a loud grinding sound echoed throughout the training field as the twin orbs rotated against the senjutsu-infused scythe. Menma used the blunt side of his scythe to smash Naruto away from him as the Rasengans dissipated. Naruto was blasted back through several trees by Menma's senjutsu and chakra strength-infused slash before coming to a halt. Naruto groaned as his back collided with a tree. He wasn't seriously hurt thanks to his senjutsu, but the attack had been shocking. He jumped away, looking up, as Menma slammed down with his 6 arms, forming a deep crater. Naruto quickly regained his footing and used his frog-style martial art to kick the transformed Menma away from him, smashing him against a tree across the training field and creating a large cloud of dust in the process. Menma walked out of the shadow cast by the dust, black blood dripping from his brow and a manic grin stretching across his face. Shio shivered as she realized what was going to happen. She had previously trained with Menma and had drawn blood on several occasions. Menma's phantom bloodline limit was both creepy and powerful. His blood was so contaminated with toxins that he could control it and produce more to compensate for any blood he lost due to his jutsus. The only requirement was that he be injured in order to use it. She once asked why he didn't just cut himself to use his jutsu, only to get a deadpan look and the response, "I'm not that desperate." Menma chuckled as he touched the black blood dripping from his brow and looked at Naruto. That was a mistake. Blood floated above his hand in an orb and Menma waved his arm at Naruto, bloody daggers. The orb transformed into blood kunai and fired at Naruto at high speeds. Naruto ducked out of the way as the black kunai splattered into multiple pools of blood on the ground behind him. Naruto looked at the puddles and exclaimed angrily, "Oi! What the hell? What are you doing using jutsu from your own blood?" "My just you may be unusual, but they are effective," Menma said, pointing behind Naruto. When the boy in question turned around, he saw 10 black daggers floating behind him. Naruto slumped his shoulders, knowing he had been defeated. "Alright, you win," he said. Menma nodded, and the daggers flew back into Menma's forehead, healing the cut instantly. Menma sighed and released his senjutsu form, sinking all spider appendages back into his back as he readjusted his kimono top. Naruto's eyes twinkled as Menma let down his guard and vanished in a plume of smoke. Naruto emerged from the foliage behind Menma, his fingers forming a tiger sign, and yelled, "Konoha's secret technique. 1,000 years of pain." Shio and Minato both face-palmed as they saw Naruto's technique. "Kakashi. You are not at all different in this dimension," Minato sighed as he looked up at the sky. Menma caught the 2 fingers and deadpanned at his alternate, "Just don't," before the devastating technique could land. "Then I will clone exploding jutsu," grinned Naruto as the clone exploded at point-blank range. Menma jumped out of the smoke from the explosion, looking only slightly worse for wear as he used his chakra web to search for the real Naruto. As he spread his chakra throughout the forest surrounding the chakra web, he widened his eyes and dove out of the way as Naruto slammed into the ground with a massive Rasengan. As 3 more Narutos converged on him with giant spiraling balls, Menma flipped back onto his feet. "He has only 2 legitimate jutsu," Menma growled as he dodged clones holding large balls of death. However, he knows how to use them in so many different ways that he is completely predictable while also being unpredictable due to the versatility of the 2 techniques. He is a walking paradox. Menma decided to boost his power by channeling more Sage Chakra into his legs, which he transformed into the lower body of a spider. All of the Narutos stared wide-eyed at the transformation before the half-spider vanished in an instant, erasing all of the clones in the field. Menma reappeared in the middle of the field, staring at the empty space behind Minato, exclaiming, "Show yourself, Naruto." A rock exploded behind the two spectators, and Naruto stepped out, grinning madly at his alternate. "You are so creepy but so cool." Menma scowled at his substitute. Couldn't he take anything seriously? Naruto smirked as he formed two clones beside him, and they joined their hands to form a Rasengan with a shuriken-like shell on the outside. The technique produced a loud shrieking sound, demonstrating the jutsu's power. Menma scowled at the jutsu before absorbing more senjutsu and transforming into his most powerful form. "You better avoid this." "Less power, Rasen Shuriken!" yelled Naruto.
Menma completed his transformation just in time and put his hands in front of him, strengthening them with as much toxins, chakra, and black blood as he could as the technique slammed into his defense.
The technique clashed with his defense as the two powerhouse techniques squared off. A massive explosion erupted in the middle of the field in a flash of light. Naruto's eyes widened in alarm. "Crap. Did I go too far?" Before rushing forward to assist his alternate, he felt a blade on his neck and turned to see Menma behind him, still in his level 1 form, and muttered, "How? You are not the only one who knows how to infuse clones with sage chakra," Menma chuckled. "Ha ha ha. I knew an alternate of me would have to know the awesomeness of the shadow clone jutsu. But Mon, you are so awesome. You are super strong but super creepy that it just freaks me out." Naruto exclaimed. "That is a compliment." Menma exclaimed. "Thanks. You're not bad yourself. If we had fought seriously, I'm sure this fight would have lasted much longer." "Yeah. Now let's go out for ramen, friend," Naruto exclaimed. Menma exhaled a sigh. 4 weeks later. Menma sat atop the Hokage monument, looking out over the village, deep in thought. He'd spent 2 weeks in this dimension, meeting the alternates of his Leaf comrades, and was thoroughly disappointed. His teammates were not nearly as skilled in his world as they were in his. Yakumo was no ninja, and Lee only knew the Iron Fist method. Sakura was a weaker version of himself, and Mito did not exist at all. He had to wonder if any of his friends would be as strong as they are now if his parents hadn't abandoned him. Could all of his childhood events have resulted in a much better world than his alternate? He looked down and transformed his hand into its level 3 form. He would not have met Elise and would not have grown as strong if he had not been abandoned. Even if he had already forgiven his parents, the underlying anger remained. Long buried, but still bubbling beneath the surface. But seeing this world, seeing himself without his family or friends, was a harsh reality check. It demonstrated that even the most difficult times in his life caused him to grow as a person. A better individual. Perhaps he should let go of his rage and accept himself for who he is. Minato and Kushina's son. When Shio's chakra appeared behind him, he opened his eyes. "Menma. Father figured out a way for us to get home. We're leaving tomorrow," rushed Shio. "That's great," Menma said, turning around. "But Shio, I have something to ask you." "What is it?" Shio inquired of the spider summoner. "Do you love me?" Menma asked, his hair blowing behind him as he looked into her eyes. Shio's eyes widened in surprise. "Menma. What?" "The moment we leave this dimension, we will be at war with the remnants of the Akatsuki," Menma said, turning away from her. "I need to know now, so I can fight and possibly die with no regrets." Shio sighed softly as he looked into his purple eyes. Menma. You may be my brother, but I must confess that I have loved you for a long time. Menma hugged her, burying his face in her hair, and smiled happily, eerily similar to the Naruto of this dimension. Shio also wrapped her arms around him as they stood in silence, savoring the moment. Menma raised his eyes to the heavens and said softly, Shio. Shio raised an eyebrow and asked, yes? Menma's eyes took on a calmness that he hadn't seen since he was 5. Call me Naruto. Hokage's office. The next morning, Shio and Naruto arrived at Tsunade's office. Minato was already there, finishing a floor seal. Tsunade had kept their arrival in this dimension a closely guarded secret. Only people who had a direct relationship with the dimension travelers were permitted to meet them. That's why only Kakashi and Naruto were present to send them off. Despite Danzo's death and the Foundation's dismantling, Tsunade did not want rumors about Minato's rebirth or the appearance of his children to spread. Minato finished the seal, sighing heavily. Phew, this is definitely one of the most difficult seals I've created. Shio examined the seal with interest. She was no slouch when it came to seals, but nowhere near her father's level. I recognize the basic structure of the Hirishin, but with several layers overlapping it. The seal did resemble the Hirishin seal, with several circles surrounding the central matrix. The seal was completed by wrapping a triangle around the circle and attaching smaller circles to each point. Correct. I based this seal on my Hirishin. It was difficult, but I changed the seal from traveling distances to dimensions. All we needed was an anchor to our original dimension. Thankfully, I can use the faulty seal that sent me to this dimension in the first place. Now, I need you and Menma to stand in the circles. Menma and Shio nodded and entered the circles, taking care not to smudge any of the lines. The three could not see his face, but they could tell Kakashi was sad as he watched his sensei leave. For him, the last few weeks had been a dream come true. He had met his deceased teacher, apologized for all of his failings, and been forgiven for them. It had lifted a significant burden from his shoulders. Goodbye, sensei, he said, holding back tears. Naruto burst into tears as he saw a family he had never expected to leave the dimension. He had cherished the last few weeks. Even if he ran into his parents in the partially infinite Tsukiyomi, they were only a shadow of the real thing. The three people in front of him embodied everything he desired in a family. A stern older brother, a lively older sister, and a fantastic father. He was overcome with emotion as he said, I will miss you guys. A large flash of light illuminated the room, forcing the three to look away as they smiled sadly at the two. When the light went out, the three had vanished. Dimensional difference. As they were transported to their next destination, Naruto, Shio, and Minato were free falling down a large blue tunnel. Shio exclaimed over the roaring wind, is this how the Hirishin feels every time you use it? Minato yelled back over the wind, no. Traveling distances feels like a body flicker technique. But since we're traveling dimensions, it'll be a little rougher. And where will we appear when he reaches our dimension? Naruto asked his father. Since they were free falling, Minato shrugged as best he could, I have no idea. Theoretically, we should appear where the Hirishin was used last. Naruto looked around the tunnel, seeing flashes of different dimensions as they passed. He could see Naruto burning Konoha, another him wielding a large sword he vaguely recognized as the executioner's sword, and another fighting alongside Itachi while wearing an Akatsuki cloak. As they continued to fall, there were thousands, if not millions, of scenes. Unbeknownst to him, the others could see their own selves in the multiverse. Minato frowned as he saw many different versions of himself abandon Naruto for various reasons. His errors appeared to be multi-dimensional. He found solace in the fact that there were many more dimensions where he was able to properly raise Naruto and they grew up together as a family. Shio looked out at the infinite dimensions and saw many alternates of herself falling. As she fought her enemies, she used a variety of weapons, including swords and chakra chains. She did, however, notice one dimension and blushed furiously. She couldn't believe an alternate of hers had such a close relationship with the Kyuubi. She'd be overjoyed to get out of this tunnel. She looked down and saw light, shouting to her companions, "I see the exit. Prepare yourselves for landing. We have no idea where we are going to land," Minato said, nodding. Soon, the light became increasingly bright, forcing them to close their eyes as they prepared to enter their home dimension. Prepared to go to war. Land of Thunder. Madara, who had recently been reincarnated, emerged from the coffin and stood beside the second Tsuchikage Miu. He cast a downward glance at the allied shinobi forces. He dismissed the majority of them as trash, but he could spot a few strong shinobi among them. Specifically, the redhead in command of the forces. Next to her was the Sanbi Jinchuriki, who had recently joined the war effort after fleeing Turtle Island. A swordswoman with a broken sword stood next to the boy, protecting a girl who appeared to be a genjutsu user. He also noticed a third Tsuchikage hovering above the group. "This was not part of the plan," he said to Miu. "What happened to Nagato resurrecting me with the Rinnegan?" "There has been a change of plans. Nagato is dead, and his lover has the Rinnegan who is currently fighting your accomplice," the impure resurrection caster said through Miu. Madara nodded and returned his attention to the hundreds of shinobi in front of him. "Well then. Begin, let's," he said as he jumped down onto the desert sand. And dashed forward, glaring at the army in front of him with a Sharingan-enhanced glare. Allied forces point of view. Miu summoned Madara Uchiha to the fight, and the shinobi were forced to look on in horror. How is this possible? The masked man is supposed to be Madara. Kushina exclaimed. He must have been lying, Yakumo said, shaking her head, but we should focus on the problem at hand. Madara was known as the strongest Uchiha for a reason. Yes, but with teamwork and my new friend Isobu, I know we can succeed. Lee nodded. Kushina nodded. Lee had stayed on Turtle Island with the eight-tailed Jinchuriki. Lee became friends with the eccentric Jinchuriki, who taught Lee how to connect with his inner Biju. Lee had breezed through each trial and had made friends with the three-tailed turtle Isobu. The two apparently got along well because the turtle let Lee use his chakra freely. He'd even figured out what the Biju's name was. Kushina was slightly embarrassed that she had never attempted to befriend the Kyuubi after learning of their relationship. Hopefully we can defeat or hold him off long enough for Konan, Sasuke, and the rest of the cages to defeat the masked man, Kushina said as she drew her sword. Everyone nodded and prepared themselves as Madara approached them. Men and women prayed in front of religious idols. Madara started jogging lightly. People began to sweat as they sensed the ancient Uchiha's bloodlust. Madara launched herself into a full-fledged sprint towards the allied forces. The shinobi forces broke the silence with battle cries as they dashed to meet the Uchiha head-on. The first battle was a slaughter. As Madara constantly redirected their attacks against each other, ninja fell left and right. Temari, on the other hand, was able to blast Madara out of the main army, and Kushina took command, saying, "All non-cage level shinobi to support. Do not directly engage and provide support for us." The remaining Jonin disengaged, allowing Kushina, Lee, and Mito to engage the Uchiha directly. Madara drew a sword from a dead Kumo ninja and challenged the three to a sword fight. The fight was a flurry of swords that appeared to be an elegant dance between the three swordsmen from a distance. Lee stepped back from the fight, clasped his hands together, and hexagonal plates covered his skin as he infused himself with his Biju's chakra. Deep sea coral gauntlets, he thought as he flashed through hand signs. Coral sprouted from his hands, encasing them in diamond-hard coral. Yukumo, who had stayed out of the fight for the time being, had completed her painting and was about to perform her genjutsu. Madara, on the other hand, quickly sensed the chakra and converged on her at breakneck speed. Lee dashed forward at full speed with his new gauntlets to intercept the Uchiha, the Biju's power propelling him forward as he reared his fist back to punch the undead Uchiha. Madara deflected the punch, and they fought brutally as Madara dodged the ninja army's slashes and ninjutsu. He appeared to have eyes all over his body to deflect and dodge attacks from all directions. Yukumo directed chakra into her painting, and the world around Madara twisted and changed as reality warped due to the power of the illusion. Taking advantage of the illusion, Lee raised his fist and thought, if he can deflect any attack that comes at him, then I'll just attack him from every direction at once while he's distracted. He dashed forward, his fist glowing green, punching Madara. The attack was easily blocked by the Uchiha's sword, but Lee noticed his eyes widen when he noticed the glowing green boxing gloves hovering around them. He had just broken free from the genjutsu, but it was too late to stop the attack as hundreds of green fists descended on the Uchiha. When Madara muttered the simple words, Shinra Tensai, Lee's eyes changed and he was blasted back. The blast also destroyed Yukumo's artwork, ending the illusion and sending Yukumo away. Impressive three-tailed Jinchuriki, but it is time I showed you the true power of the Uchiha. Madara crossed his arms as his eyes glowed with the Rinnegan. Impressive three-tailed Jinchuriki, but it is time I showed you the true power of the Uchiha. A massive purple warrior emerged around him, growing as large as many of the stone pillars around them. As the large legless monolith raised 4 swords to cut them down, the shinobi gaped. Lee leapt in front of the allied shinobi forces, brandishing a large hexagonal shield to shield everyone from the 4 glowing swords. How long do you think you'll be able to protect them? Madara asked the Jinchuriki. Lee reared back, his armored fist glowing brightly as he dashed forward and punched the Susanoo with a large glowing green fist nearly the size of the chakra construct, perhaps for the first time in his life. I will protect them with my entire body and spirit until all the flames of passion in my body have burnt to their pinnacle. The 2 battlefield monsters clashed, one with the power of his Biju and the other with the power of his god-like eyes. Madara jumped back, noticing his Susanoo cracking severely from the strain of taking all of Lee's blows. If you think you can protect everyone, protect them all from this, he said, flashing through hand signs as his Susanoo mimicked him and shouted, Heavens conceal. As a shadow engulfed the sand, every shinobi looked up. Many simply dropped their weapons in surrender as they gazed upon Madara's godlike power. A large asteroid the size of the moon was rapidly approaching the Earth. Lee looked at it for a few seconds before sprinting forward and leaping into the air, calling out to his Biju, Isobu. Please assist me. Isobu responded in Lee's mindscape with his gravelly voice, let us join forces, young one. The shinobi gasped as Lee transformed into a massive turtle that engulfed them, roaring as hexagonal plates covered the shinobi and itself in a dome. As the meteorite smashed into the dome, Isobu roared once more, the shield barely holding up against the force of the space rock. As he looked up at the 3 tails, Madara smirked, impressive, but how will you defend yourself against the second? As the shinobi beneath the turtle relaxed, another meteorite broke through the cloud cover and slammed into the top of the first asteroid, shattering the shield and slamming into the shell of the Sanbi, severely cracking it. The rocks broke apart and hammered the shinobi bellow as Isobu shrank to reveal a knocked-out Lee. Madara dismissed the Susanoo and began walking forward to retrieve the Jinchuriki when a tri-pronged kunai landed in front of him and Kushina appeared with her sword in mid-swing at his head, which he easily blocked with the sword he had scavenged. Wasn't that the fourth Hokage's power? Kushina smiled a little. Other than Jiraiya, who do you think taught him about seals? As golden chains burst from Madara's back, each with a Hiroshin kunai attached, Kushina manipulated the chains to throw them all at Madara. The Uchiha deflected the kunai and moved to deflect a sword strike from where Kushina appeared, only to feel his eyes widen as she vanished and sliced through him from behind, slicing him in half. However, because he was an Edo Tensei construct, his body healed quickly. He tried to slash her back, but she flashed away to another kunai. Kushina panted lightly while clutching her sword, but smirked slightly when she noticed a shadow behind Madara. Madara quickly turned around to counter whatever the person behind him had planned, but he was caught off guard by a massive slash of wind from Mito's 7-foot-long katana, which cut him in half as he thought quickly, how did she fix her sword when it was clearly broken? As he reformed, he was constantly under siege from the two swordswomen's quick strikes. With Mito's extended sword and key strikes boosting her, she was at the same level as Madara in terms of swordsmanship. With Kushina's added assistance, the undead Uchiha was forced to rely more and more on his invincibility. Before they could kill Madara again, a bright light flared around him, and he felt his spirit separate from his body. As a result, the summoner has been defeated. HMPH, useless. Kushina smiled cheerfully, that means we triumphed. Madara smirked, not yet. He ran through 4 hand seals and pressed his hands together in a prayer sign, and the glow faded, and he reformed with his previously decaying body. The Edo Tensei's weakness is that if the summoned shinobi knows the hand signs, they can summon themselves to this plane once the summoner has been defeated. This has given me a body that cannot die or run out of chakra. Kushina frowned. We will, however, find a way to defeat you. They resumed the fight, with Mito and Kushina working well together to keep Madara from using his destructive ninjutsu attacks. Madara frowned as he regenerated for the 6th time. One weakness of the Edo Tensei was that you regenerate slower each time you suffer a metaphorical death. It was now taking his body parts longer and longer to regenerate. His eyes had nearly recovered after using the heaven concealment, Mokuton. Fantastic forest emergence. Trees began to grow out of the sand all around the battlefield, attempting to bind or stab the two women as they dodged and cut through the foliage. Madara smirked, knowing they would not be attacked. It was just a distraction to allow his eyes to heal. When Kushina and Mito emerged from the now forested landscape, they were surprised to see the Rinnegan active in Madara's eyes again, and Madara chuckled before speaking, "It is now time for you to confront true power." Susanoo reappeared around Madara, but this time the spirit warrior was as tall as the mountains that surrounded the desert, and Madara looked down from the jewel of the being, perfect Susanoo. Nobody has ever looked at this form and lived. Let's see how long you two can hold out. Madara raised one of the Susanoo's leads and began to drop it down on the two, causing Kushina and Mito to look up in horror at the large foot. Would this be how they died? Crushed like insects? However, just as the foot was about to crush them, a flash of light appeared behind them, and the foot came to a halt an instant before it crushed them. Kushina and Mito looked up to see Menma standing there holding the foot up with one hand and smirking at them. Kushina's eyes widen as she sees her son, who had vanished nearly a month before, and she can't help but gasp, Menma. How many times will I have to say this? My name is Naruto, Menma grinned. Despite the circumstances, Kushina shed tears as Naruto accepted the name she and Minato had given him for the first time in 10 years. Shio and Minato appeared alongside them, staring up at the massive chakra construct, and Kushina felt hope for the first time since the fight began. Alright. Enough that's of that, Naruto grunted as his foot pressed down harder. He gripped the foot with both hands, infused himself with level 1 senjutsu, filled all of his veins with black blood, and slammed the giant into the ground with a roar. They all stood there as the giant stood up, and Lee, who had recently been revived, joined them. As Madara looked down at them once more, Shio spoke for all of them. "All right, let the real battle begin." The Lightning Coast. As they gazed up at the giant statue of the Gedo Mezzo, Sasuke, Killer Bee, Kakashi, Might Guy, Conan, and the rest of the cages panted. They soon discovered that Toby was faking his possession of the three-tailed Biju, but he had access to its previous owner, Yagura. Because Yagura died with the Biju sealed inside of him, he still had a significant amount of chakra inside of him, which was easily transferred to the Gedo Mezzo. They had fought for hours against the masked man and his controlled Biju, forcing him to merge all of the Biju and parts of Biju he had collected into an incomplete Jubi. The beast appeared deformed, but it exuded a powerful chakra presence. "We should join back up with the rest, we cannot fight the beast without them," Sasuke said to his allies as he stared up at the beast. "You got that right, yo. We need Tomato and 3-0 with us to fight this thing, oh," said Killer Bee. As they fled to join their allies, the newly revealed Obito stared down at them. He'd let them, but he needed to meet with Madara as well. Land of Thunder. The Alliance's cage-level shinobi gathered and stared up at the unfinished Jubi with Madara and Obito riding on its head. Naruto was taken inside his mindscape before they could resume fighting. Mindscape. Naruto frowned at the nine-tailed god. "Could you mind? I was a little busy. I never thought it would end up like this." The Jubi revived despite all my precautions and humanity's greatest heroes fighting against him. "You will lose as you are now," Inari said, looking down at the reflective pool beneath them. "We will fight together, and perhaps die together," Naruto said to the god of the wild, "but we aren't leaving without first taking Madara with us." "It will not be enough," Inari said, shaking his white fox head, "but to make amends for my mistakes, I will assist you in this fight." "What can you do to help?" said Naruto, raising an eyebrow. Inari's eyes shone brightly, and a spirit-like replica of him emerged from his body and entered Naruto. The spider summoner's eyes widened as he felt his chakra levels shift completely to Senjutsu chakra. He no longer felt compelled to collect chakra because it was naturally produced by his body. He looked up in awe at Inari. "I am the god of the wilds. Senjutsu is my domain, and I have given you the ability that I gave the Sage of the Six Paths so long ago to help him end all of the world's wars," Inari said. "Alright, let's do this," Naruto said, nodding and clenching his fist. In the real world. Naruto snapped his eyes open, revealing glowing green orbs with a white spider design, and attached chakra strings to each of his allies, granting them senjutsu. Each member of the group felt their power level increase tenfold and stared in awe at the source of the power as he radiated the power of nature. "We must win, because the entire world is at stake," Naruto said, looking up at the Jubi. "Now, the Moon's Eye plan will be complete," Madara said, looking down at the senjutsu-enhanced foe. The two sides were joined together with a roar heard for miles. Land of Thunder. The Shinobi Alliance's strongest members stood together against the strongest opponents they had ever faced. The Jubi appeared in front of them, bearing the two most powerful Uchiha in 1,000 years on its head. For a few tense seconds, the battle was silent as they waited for each side to make the first move. The silence was soon broken by the Jubi's roar, which was loud enough to shatter any fragile object miles away. The demon raised an enormous claw, ready to squish the alliance into mush. The Tsuchikage took command of defense and exclaimed to the group, "Every defense specialist, block the beast's attacks. The rest of us, figure out how to destroy it and the Uchihas." The group nodded, and soon enough, green panels, large rock formations, sand, and even cement were forming a wall to withstand the completed Biju's relentless attacks. "We need to defeat Madara and Obito and release their control of the Jubi," the Raikage said to the rest of the group. "Minato, you take a small task force to the top of the Jubi while the rest of us focus on the body itself." Minato nodded in agreement and quickly selected Kakashi, Shio, and Menma to ascend the Jubi. "I have to go with you," exclaimed Kushina angrily. "Your adamantine chains are better for defense against the Jubi, don't worry. I will defeat them. After all, our children will be with me," Minato said, shaking his head. Kushina noticed how he included Kakashi in that group but nodded, slightly tearing up as she saw the determination in his eyes. "Good luck. You better return to me or you will be sleeping on the couch in the afterlife." The fourth Hokage looked at his wife sadly and threw a Hiroshin kunai to the top of the Jubi, calling to his team, "Grab onto me and I will take us up there." The four shinobi held onto his coat as they vanished in a yellow flash. The head of Jubi. The team appeared and saw the two Uchiha directing the Jubi. "It is time to end this, Obito. I never thought the cheerful boy I knew could be reduced to this, but it all ends here." Minato glared at his former student and his new master. Obito clutched his warfan tighter as he yelled back at his sensei, "Everything I've done, everything I'm planning to do, is to bring peace to the world. You had your chance to bring peace. But you failed, and now I'll send the world into an eternal sleep as they forget their hatred and finally accept one another. There is no more reconciliation for you, Obito. I will gladly reduce myself to lower than scum to kill you here today. The Team 7 of the previous generation ends here today," said Kakashi's Sharingan. "Shio and I will take on Madara, you two face Obito," Menma said, looking at the two. The two older shinobi separated with a nod. Obito vs. Kakashi and Minato. Minato made the first move, dash forward at Obito, who responded by dash forward as well. As he threw his kunai at his student's head, Minato had a mental flashback. He recalled all of the good times he had with Team 7. Despite his flaws, Obito had been his favorite student. Now they must fight to the death on top of a primordial god. He jerked himself awake and threw his Hiroshin kunai at Obito's head. As they were about to collide, the kunai sailed past Obito's head. As Minato teleported himself above Obito, the Rasengan in his hand was already spiraling into existence. Obito recognized the move from their previous fight and asked as the ball approached his back, "Do you think I'd fall for the same trick twice?" He remained ethereal and let Minato pass by him again. As he watched the Rasengan drill harmlessly against the Jubi, he smirked and began to absorb Minato into his Kamui. Minato threw a kunai away to avoid the suction before responding, "Perhaps not, but you seem to have forgotten I am not alone this time." Obito had barely opened his eyes when Kakashi dove straight into his Kamui portal. The Uchiha stumbled back in surprise, turning his body intangible to avoid another Rasengan from Minato. Obito glared as his father passed through him, saying, "Can't you see it's useless? With the Mangekyo Sharingan, I'm invincible." Obito abruptly paused in his monologue when he hunched over, as if punched in the gut. Another dimension. Under his mask, Kakashi smiled as he buried his fist in the chest of his former teammate. He recalled how they devised this strategy to defeat Obito. Flashback. Minato and his most trusted ninja were in a locked room. They couldn't risk anyone listening in on their conversation. He addressed the room as everyone arrived, saying, "I have a plan to counter the masked man's intangibility. I have researched his ability from the descriptions of everyone who has fought him and I discovered something very interesting. Madara does not simply turn intangible, he removes himself from this plane of existence," said the Hokage. "Are you suggesting that his ability sends him to another dimension?" Menma frowned as he tried to understand what his father was saying. Ever since our journey to the alternate dimension, I have been studying dimensional travel. Through this research, I have figured out how his technique works. Madara sends pieces of himself to another dimension while using genjutsu to hide his missing body parts to make it appear as if he is intangible. What we need to do is send someone to this dimension to fight Madara with someone else fighting him on the outside. Shio pondered the plan. Who would go into the Kamui? If Madara dies, the person would be stuck on the other side. Yes, but we can summon him from this side as long as we have an imprint of his chakra, Minato smirked. Or I could go in, my own Kamui can send objects to an alternate dimension, perhaps I could send myself to the dimension and back, Kakashi said next. Yes, just remember, when we fight them, jump into his Kamui to negate his intangibility, Minato said. Flashback concludes. The chest piece vanished before Kakashi could hit him again, and he looked around the dimension. It seemed strangely familiar to him, but he couldn't place it. In the real world, Minato launched a vicious attack on Obito now that his intangibility had been exposed. They jumped over the back of the Jubi, seeing flashes of the other battles as they fought each other out of the corner of their eyes. Memories of the past haunted them as they plotted to kill each other. They clashed once more, with Obito's kunai battling a three-pronged knife. Obito's eyes widened as Minato vanished behind him and he was forced to enter his Kamui. From Kamui World. When Obito emerged from the Kamui, he had to avoid a Rakiri, and the two teammates were soon engaged in a battle for their lives. Obito growled as he jumped back and flashed some hand signs, fire style, fire cyclone. The Uchiha spat out a massive firestorm that circled the gray-haired Jonin like a twister. Kakashi activated one of his newer techniques that he had perfected over the years, lightning style, Rakiri drill. Lightning appeared in a spiraling motion all down his arm, forming a perfect drill around his arm. Kakashi ripped through the fire technique and was about to pierce Obito when he vanished into the real world. Kakashi was forced to direct his attack's energy outward, resulting in a large explosion in the empty space. Unbeknownst to the Jonin, the dimension's black sky began to crack as a result of the amount of chakra being released within it. In the real world, Minato was prepared when Obito appeared with a Hiroshin kunai and cut Obito's cheek. After constantly fighting two separate fronts in his Kamui in this dimension, the Uchiha was beginning to show signs of wear. Minato knew it was time to wrap this up. He summoned two shadow clones nearby and formed a Rasengan in each hand, while the clones added wind chakra. He felt an echo of his alternate son nod to him as he used his signature technique, Rasen Shuriken Barrage. Minato gathered all of the chakra he could spare and burst it from his palms, propelling the two spheres forward at high speeds towards the Uchiha. Obito was dangerously low on chakra and could barely enter his Kamui. He winced as he entered the bleak dimension, his arm heavily cut due to his tardiness in entering this dimension. He looked up to see Kakashi with a lightning sword in his hand. He felt his chakra was too low to fight, so he started draining chakra from the dimension he was in, desperate to survive and realize his dream.
However, the two came to a halt when they heard a large crack above them.
They widened their eyes as the dimension's ceiling began to rain down on them and an ethereal green light was seen behind the cracks. Kakashi looked at Obito and noticed that he, too, was surprised by this development. He was wondering what was causing this when his eyes widened as he recognized that light. It was the same light that he had seen in Limbo. He frantically looked around the dimensions, noticing the parallels to the plane of existence he was on when he died in the battle against Pain. They had been fighting in the realm between life and death without realizing it. They had just broken down the gates to hell. Naruto and Shio versus Madara. The Uchiha Patriarch sat on the Jubi's head, looking down on his two opponents. He silently rejoiced at this development. The strongest of the next generation versus the greatest shinobi of all time. He thought it was appropriate. They were about to start when a green light appeared beside the two Uzumaki and Sasuke, glaring at Madara. Shio looked surprised at her former teammate, Sasuke? "I will fight alongside you in this battle," Sasuke said as he looked up at the source of all his pain. "This will be the hardest fight of our lives," Naruto smirked as he prepared himself for the fight of their lives. Shio tightened her grip on her katana as Sasuke prepared his ethereal spears. "Then there is only one way to win this," Sasuke smiled, recalling something Kakashi once said. Shio smiled happily as she remembered the incident. "That's right, the only way is." Despite not being present at the team meeting, Menma understood what they were saying and spoke at the same time. Teamwork. Together or alone, it makes little difference. You shall all fall as so many before you. Now come forward, let us dance to decide the fate of this ruined world. Madara said to the three below him. Madara versus Naruto, Shio, and Sasuke. Shio dashed forward as soon as Madara moved, and to the untrained eye, katana and warfan clashed in a blur. Sasuke, too, dashed forward, hurling spears at his ancestor. As he helped to support Sasuke and Shio on the offensive, Naruto knew he could rely on them. He stretched out his chakra strings and connected them to the two, sending healing chakra, energizing poisons, and nature chakra to aid them in their fight against the immortal Uchiha. Shio swung her glowing sword down on the Uchiha, roaring. Her eyes were already glowing with yellow energy from combining the Kyuubi and Sage chakras. Despite the attack's ferocity, Madara deflected it with his reinforced fan and batted her away with a compressed wind blast. Sasuke's glowing green body turned an ethereal blue as the Sage chakra mixed with his Kagatsuchi as the Sage chakra entered his system. He began raining spears down on Madara, smirking as many of them appeared to injure the Uchiha before regenerating. While Shio gathered herself for another attack, Menma channeled healing chakra to her and dashed forward to engage the Uchiha. He slammed his palm into Madara's warfan with a roar, releasing a large explosion of air pressure behind Madara. He began to batter the Uchiha with swift but devastating punches and palm thrusts, his palms glowing with the amount of chakra he was charging into his hands. As they fought, Naruto noticed a small crack in the handle of the warfan, felt a series of tugs on the chakra string that was attached to Sasuke, and did one last palm thrust before jumping out of the way of a massive spear that drilled into Madara's nearly impenetrable warfan. The older Uchiha tried his hardest to keep his fan intact by channeling Mokuton chakra into it, but it was no match for the nature chakra-enhanced Kagatsuchi spear. The spear shattered through the fan and bore a hole into the undead Madara with a loud thud. Shio dashed forward with a seal, approaching the Uchiha. When Madara noticed the girl approaching him with a seal, he exclaimed, "I cannot be ended here." Susanoo. The menacing chakra construct rose above Madara, and he smirked, knowing he was safe from any attack. Thousands of chakra strings emerged from Naruto's hand and attached themselves to the Susanoo, spider-style, life drain. Chakra from the construct began seeping into all of the strings back to Menma and everyone he attached his chakra strings to, refilling all of their chakra pools from Madara's Edo Tensei Shell's endless supply. Something like this will not defeat me. Madara grunted as he felt more and more of his chakra leave him, his Susanoo showing signs of severe cracks as he struggled to keep his chakra under control to sustain the technique. Do it now. I can't keep him bound for much longer. Naruto winced as the chakra backlash of having so many chakra strings cut reflected back at him. Shio and Sasuke dashed together, the former Avenger grabbing Shio's guard and channeling his ethereal power into the weapon. Soon, Her blade was as bright as Sasuke's spears. Shio gripped her sword tightly, deciding to employ her most powerful sword technique. She vanished, sending a large amount of wind chakra to her feet, and 4 bright flashes of green light appeared around Madara. Shio knelt behind the nihilist, sheathing her blade, Swallow's final dance. The Susanoo seemed to scream as it was cut up. Because his chakra was still fluctuating from Naruto's chakra drain attack, Madara struggled to regenerate himself. A glowing green spear pierced his heart before he could fully regenerate. He was taken aback when he felt pain in his chest. In an Edo Tensei body, he can't feel pain. He looked down at the spear, surprised to see the face of someone he had thought he had dealt with for a long time. Callista was victoriously grinning at him from the spear, clutching at his soul, which was bound within the dead body he possessed. Finally Madara. I will have my revenge. Callista began to tear his soul from the carcass. Sasuke was taken aback as the spear he had used transformed into his mentor, and his eyes widened as she dragged Madara's soul back into Yami, screaming and begging for release. Shio, Naruto, and Sasuke were slightly stunned as they stared at the spot where Madara once stood. Shio inquired hesitantly, "Is it over?" "No, we need to deal with this beast," Naruto said, shaking his head as he stared at the Jubi below them, still struggling to breach the Shinobi Alliance's defenses. However, before they could react, they heard a large crack as the very foundations of existence appeared to crumble. Kakashi and Minato appeared in a swirl of darkness, both terrified. "Kakashi, what is going on?" Naruto inquired of the Jonin. "The end of everything," Kakashi said hauntingly to his sensei's son. Before they could ask him what he meant, they noticed that the Jubi had come to a halt as the cracks spread across the sky. As green mist seeped into their world, the entire sky shattered. The only thing that remained were the green-tinted moon and Obito's black eyes staring down at them. Everything was deafeningly quiet. Thousands of shinobi, civilians, and animals remained silent as they watched the goddess emerge into their world. As the aura of Izanami pervaded the land, they could feel the omnipresent feeling of despair and hopelessness wash over them. Even the Jubi remained silent, recognizing his creator's presence. Obito's body rippled and transformed into a black-haired woman who Naruto vaguely recognized from his mindscape vision. Because of the god's presence, none of them could move. Izanami did not gloat or speak in a moment. She simply smiled motherly down on the earth, and the Jubi transformed and began to suffocate every human in the world. The 5 shinobi on top of the now fully transformed Biju could only watch in horror as the goddess carried out the moon's eye plan. They watched as the wooden tendrils crept closer to them. A bright flash overtook them before they could be ensnared within the illusionary world, and they knew nothing more. Naruto gradually opened his eyes, becoming aware of his surroundings. He appeared to be lying in the most beautiful water he had ever seen. Blue crystals glittered beautifully across the landscape, while the setting sun hung in the distance, bathing the sky in a lovely orange hue. He stood up, looked out over the landscape, and muttered, knowing he'd get no response, "Am I in heaven?" Despite his initial thoughts, a voice replied, "No, but you're getting close." He turned around to see an elderly man standing next to him. The man appeared tired and worn down, his white hair laying lifelessly down his back. His clothes appeared to have seen better days. Regardless of his appearance, he recognized the man as Lord Izanagi. "Yes, you must be surprised to see me, Lord of Heaven, in such a state," Izanagi said sadly to the spider summoner. Naruto nodded, intrigued as to what had caused the world's most powerful god to become so weathered. "I am the god of all the goodness of humanity, and my strength is reflected upon the universal consciousness of all humanity," Izanagi sighed as he gazed out at the setting sun. The mortal considered this information and came to an unexpected conclusion. The last time humanity was peaceful was. Yes. Izanagi is very clever. She manipulated humanity from her seal to hate and despise each other, weakening me while strengthening her. Is there nothing you can do? Izanagi is currently sealing everyone in the infinite Tsukuyomi, Naruto frowned. I already have, Izanagi chuckled lightly. What have you done? The spider summoner inquired, raising an eyebrow. I only saw through Izanagi's plan 18 years ago, and by that time I was too weak to stop her, but I had enough strength to provide the world with a savior who could help mend this broken world, Izanagi explained. Naruto began to feel uneasy as he pondered the unspoken question, who is the savior? The savior of this world is you, Naruto, the god of human goodness sighed. Me? I am the last person anyone would think of as a savior. I am simply the formerly neglected child of the Namikaze family. I am steeped in darkness, the supposed savior of the world asked the god. Izanagi nodded sadly, all true, but it was my own mistakes that you ended up this way. As I previously stated, Izanagi is very clever. She learned about your existence through her latest pawn, Obito, and planned a countermeasure. Using the small amount of chakra she had in Inari, she coerced Obito to attack Konoha with the Biju. Once the beast was sealed, she was able to subtly manipulate Inari to cast. Naruto's mind was racing. He had spent his entire life looking for the ultimate answer to his existence. He used to blame his problems on Inari, but now he realizes that everything bad in his life was caused by Izanami. But why me? Why of all the newborn children in the world did it have to be me? He asked again. You must realize, Naruto, that there are many universes in the world, each one connected to the other in the most interesting of ways. In each world, there is a Naruto. Each Naruto, for good or bad, prevents Izanami's plans from succeeding. Naruto's eyes widened as Izanagi's words finally made sense to him. You mean that? Yes, you were never meant to exist, the god agreed. Naruto was at a loss for words. He was never supposed to exist, was he? What does this imply? Was he some kind of outsider invading this world? What do you mean I wasn't supposed to exist? I have a heart, a soul, a body, and feelings and emotions just like everyone else. God or not, what gives you the right to say I wasn't supposed to exist? Because I was forced to mess with fate to bring you into existence. This world needed a savior. No, it needed a messiah. Someone to lead them into a brighter and better world where Izanami cannot influence it, Izanagi sighed. But I can't be some sort of messiah. I am just the perplexed ninja nearly gripped his hair in frustration. An 18-year-old who has mastered senjutsu, mastered the chakra of a minor god, restored an ancient people to their true form, and mastered a new branch of ninjutsu. That does not sound like a normal ninja to me, Izanagi said. So you're saying that all my accomplishments are the result of divine intervention? Said Naruto. Of course not, my dear boy. Everything you've accomplished is the result of your own hard work. You may have been created by me, but you were nothing more than a regular human with the tools to be great. But that doesn't help our current situation. How am I supposed to defeat a god alone? Naruto smiled slightly. Who said anything about being alone? You have friends, don't you? Izanagi chuckled. Yeah. I do, the Jonin said, remembering everyone who had helped him get this far in life. Izanagi smiled and started walking away from the setting sun. Naruto stared at the old man, puzzled, before yelling after him, wait, where are you going? You haven't told me how to defeat Izanami. The god turned around and smiled, you already know, and appeared to de-age in front of Naruto's eyes, becoming a blonde-haired version of Naruto with golden eyes. The god then turned and walked into the distance, breaking apart into particles of light that flew into the distance as he did so, saying happily, "You are a part of me after all." Naruto looked out at the sunset, realizing Izanagi had never responded to his question about where they were. He took one last look around before smiling sadly. Of course, he could only be in the place where he felt the closest to heaven. Inari approached the boy and sat down beside him, watching the sunset. Naruto extended his hand to the fox, asking, "Will you fight with me just once?" Inari gave the human a long look before placing his palm on the much smaller appendage and saying, "Just this once, human." Naruto smiled brightly. In the real world. Naruto took a deep breath and opened his eyes. Everyone was still trapped in the massive tree, but he could still feel their chakra signatures as if they were standing beside him. When he looked down at his arms, he noticed they were covered in white fire. If he had a mirror, he'd notice that his entire body was covered in white flames, which had turned his hair white. His usual black robes had turned white as well, and he now resembled Izanagi. He looked up at the dark goddess and knew instinctively how to float up to join her. He leveled with the god as he floated off the tree, and they exchanged long stares. "I see that my fool of a husband's last resort has finally emerged," Izanami sighed softly. "I will defeat you," Naruto said to the goddess. Izanami laughed at the absurd statement. "How? All of your precious comrades are in my illusion, leaving you alone." "You are wrong," Naruto smirked softly. Izanami was perplexed by this statement. "I am never alone. Humanity does not wish to fade away. Everyone you entrapped, even if they don't realize it, but they all believe in me. And that is all that matters. Tell me, Izanami, how are gods created?" As she realized what the boy in front of her was implying, Izanami's face twisted into a snarl. Naruto smiled smugly as he gathered more and more nature chakra. "That's right. Gods are created when enough of humanity believes in their existence. That is the source of your power. And just as there is always darkness in humanity, there is always hope as well. Strengthening him with humanity's hopes and dreams." The dreams of the people trapped in the tree transformed into the same landscape that Naruto had just left in every cocoon among the tree. Shio looked around at the gathered people into the sky, thinking, "Naruto." Without realizing it, they all pointed to the sky, formed chakra strings, and sent them into the sky. Soon after, he transformed into level 3 Senjutsu, but this time his insect-like wings transformed into a colored glass texture. Chakra strings linked him to everyone who was connected to the Jubi, giving him even more power. Izanami was taken aback by the empowered human. How could an ordinary human rise to the power of a god? Naruto glared at the representation of humanity's darkness and raised an arm scythe, "Let us dance, Izanami," and shot towards the goddess, his wings pointing downward. They were soon engaged in a fierce battle. Naruto fights Izanami's sword with his arm scythes and new sharp wings. Down on the ground, the prophet Aragog looked up at the battle, along with the other summons who had been summoned. And so the spider fights fate and frees himself from the web of despair and flies free. Aragog couldn't find the right words to describe the battle in the skies. Naruto flew away from the battle and flashed some hand signals, toxic style, drops of the lethe. Golden orbs of poison flew at the goddess at breakneck speeds. Izanami attempted to flee, but one of the orbs connected to her arm and instantly dissolved it. She tried to regrow the limb but was surprised when her arm did not regrow. The poison of the lethe removes whatever it touches from existence. Even for you, it will be difficult to regrow, Naruto smirked smugly. You will pay for that, boy. The dark goddess growled, forming a new arm out of darkness. Izanami formed a bow out of black flames and began firing volleys of Amaterasu flames at the newly formed god. Naruto clasped his hands together, aware that he might be too late to avoid the thousands of dark arrows. A wall of green hexagonal plates formed in front of him before he could do anything. With wide eyes, he turned to the side and saw Lee grinning at him, both thumbs up. The arrows landed harmlessly against the green wall, and Naruto flew towards the goddess at breakneck speed. Izanami attempted to retaliate with her sword but swung in the wrong direction, allowing Naruto to cut her slightly with his sides. Looking to the side, he noticed Yakumo nodding firmly at him, holding a template and a brush in her hands. He continued his assault on the nearly impenetrable goddess until he noticed a shadow of Anko placing a palm at the back of Izanami, at which point he dashed to the goddess's back and activated Anko's deathmark seal. A golden kunai stabbed Izanami through the heart as he activated the seal. The goddess growled and yanked the kunai out, healing the wound. Menma nodded to Anko's ghost and continued to look for weaknesses in the goddess. As they fought, scythes against swords appeared beside him, followed by golden chains that bound the goddess. He caught sight of Kushina encouragingly nodding out of the corner of his eye. Using the opening, he was able to cut the goddess once more. However, the goddess regenerated in the same manner as before. Izanami suddenly broke free from the binds and would have stabbed him if he hadn't vanished in a golden flash and reappeared behind Izanami. Looking over his shoulder, he noticed Minato encouragingly placing a hand on his shoulder. "How are you doing this? What is giving you this power?" Izanami shook with rage at the arrogant mortal who stood in her way. As Izanami blocked the attack, Naruto swung his sides down. They locked their hands together and attempted to overpower each other. Out of the corner of his eye, Naruto noticed Sasuke and Shio floating beside him, and he replied to the goddess, "My friends," and pushed the goddess away, floating next to his sister and the last Uchiha. Naruto raised his scythe and began pouring senjutsu into the blade, turning it green. The spirit of Sasuke prepared a brightly glowing blue spear beside him, while Shio's spirit sword glowed dangerously as they looked down at Izanami. They coordinated their attacks on the goddess. The sky brightened as the attack connected, causing a massive explosion that could be seen for miles. Izanami slammed into the base of the tree that the Jubi had transformed into, causing the massive tree to fall into the sea. Naruto floated down to the plume of smoke, hoping that would be enough to put an end to Izanami. As the smoke cleared, he couldn't help but widen his eyes in horror at what he saw. Half of Izanami remained the same as before. But the second half was gone, replaced by a black blank featureless body. The monster's previously blank face soon developed a red eye and a manic grin. Izanami lowered her gaze to her body before addressing the newly formed god in front of her. "Now you have made me angry mortal." Naruto shivered at Izanami's voice, the still human-looking half speaking in a musical tone while the monster side spoke in a deep monstrous tone. Izanagi grinned and said, "I will show you my true power. I can use the power of any human who has died." The dark mass transformed into a perfect likeness of Madara Uchiha. "Do you see how hopeless your situation is now?" Naruto frowned and began pouring black blood into his sides, extending them further and flying at high speeds towards the Queen of the Dead, with whom he clashed once more in midair, this time scythes against sword. Izanami pushed away, and Madara's eternal Mangekyu spun as Susanoo appeared around the transformed god. Unlike the original Madara's technique, Izanami's Susanoo was female and wore an armored priestess outfit, and she began firing Amaterasu arrows at blistering speeds. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he flew closer to the Raikage, who nodded. The Konoha shinobi felt the power of lightning armor surround him as he dive-bombed the giant chakra construct, shooting through the hardened chakra and pushing Izanami out of the rapidly disappearing Susanoo in a flash of light that resembled a lightning bolt. The goddess smirked at her opponent, "Even your ancestors betray you." The image of Hashirama formed a hand sign, and roots began emerging from the ocean below them and rapidly growing to attack the floating shinobi. Onoki emerged as a spirit next to Naruto and glared at the image of his old rival before blasting the roots to dust with his bloodline limit. From Naruto's mindscape. Kushina put her hand to her mouth as she watched her son fight his opponent. "This is," she said. "It's amazing that all of these high-level attacks have yet to truly land a blow," Minato said, similarly distressed. "This is a one-hit battle," Sasuke said, staring at the image. "The first team to truly land a hit will almost certainly win." Shio nodded, "All we can do is keep lending our support." In the real world. Izanagi grinned crazily as Nagato's arm transformed into a chakra cannon and fired huge blasts of chakra at her opponent as Naruto swung his scythe down on the goddess and cut through the image of Hashirama, turning it back to a tar-like state before it transformed back into Nagato. Naruto dodged and glared down at the sickening image of Nagato being used in such a way. "How dare you spit in the face of such great men's memories? You are not a divine being. You are nothing more than a demon masquerading as God." "A demon?" grinned Izanagi, the female portion of her face cracking. "I suppose it's appropriate. In the end, it was humanity that created and sustained me. So I'm just a demon god who rules over demons. And I will demonstrate the power of a perfect example of how far humanity can fall." Nagato's face transformed into a beautiful white-haired woman with a horn that resembled a rabbit ear. "You see," said both Izanagi and the unknown woman this time. For her desire for power, this woman nearly sacrificed the entire world. "And your people refer to her as the rabbit goddess." Naruto's eyes widened as he gazed upon the human realm's progenitor of chakra, Kagaya Otsutsuki. He knew she was the perfect example of how far humans could fall, but then he remembered the faces of many of his friends and reaffirmed his resolve, knowing that not all humans were evil. "You may have been created by the darkness in every human's heart," Naruto scowled and flew down to engage her in Kenjutsu as they continued their debate. "But I'm aware that every coin has two sides. I'd met Izanagi. And I know he isn't a demon, and he certainly isn't you. He demonstrates that humanity can rise above their inherent darkness and attain the status of angels." Izanagi scowled as more of her face cracked. "Ha! Every human being is born with the ability to be evil. Your race is nothing more than a stain on the earth. If you knew how twisted your race is, you'd be begging me to destroy every single one of you." Naruto was silent for a moment as they locked blades before returning his gaze to the two-faced woman in front of him. "Being born good or working hard to overcome our evil nature? I believe the latter is correct. I am living proof of this. I could be evil. I may be referred to as the devil. But I don't care right now. Because I am the devil fighting on the side of the angels." Half of the bright light that radiated from Naruto turned black as he accepted his true nature. Throughout his life, he could easily have been considered evil. He had tortured, murdered, experimented on, and manipulated people. But he had also healed, comforted, and loved others. He was the perfect contradiction. A perfect example of humanity. "What is this?" Izanagi exclaimed as she stared at Naruto's latest transformation. "How can you have both dark and light energy? That is simply not possible." "This?" said Naruto as he poured dark and light energy into both of his blades. "This is simply humanity's combined capacity for good and evil. This is the life-giving power." He slashed the dark goddess with both of his scythes in a blur of speed, causing an explosion of energy to be released all around him. If one were to look from a great height above their position, they would see the explosion is in the shape of the yin-yang symbol. As Izanagi's physical form was destroyed, her power fluctuated wildly, and Naruto flew away as the black mass that comprised Izanami's power expanded into a huge orb filled with the faces of the dead and the negative energy of the universe. How can I destroy this? If I destroy it, I kill off every soul who has ever transcended to the afterlife. The only thing he could do was seal it back into Yami, but the power it would take. It would take the life energy of a very powerful human to accomplish. He was resigned, and as soon as he came to that conclusion, the information on how to do what he wanted came to him. It seemed even the world wanted him to succeed in this endeavor. Putting both his hands in a prayer motion, he called upon all the culminated power of his new form and a sealing array extending around him, covering the black orb as he began to give life energy to keep the sealing process going. Mindscape. Shio yelled above the din, "No. He will die if he does this." Kushina and Minato could only look on in horror as their son gave his life for humanity. It's not supposed to be like this. Shio sobbed. We were meant to grow old together. Bring up a family together. Naruto, I adore you. Sasuke locked his gaze on his teammate before hardening his resolve and preparing the technique he never expected to need. In the real world, Naruto felt a hooking sensation before being forcibly removed from the seal, staring in awe at the person who took his place, Sasuke, who was standing before him with his hands in the same hand seal that would seal Izanami's fate as well as his own. Why, Sasuke? Yelled Naruto to the Uchiha. It's simple, Sasuke replied, turning his head. It's all for Shio. What? Exclaimed Naruto. The former leaf trader looked ahead and continued with the seal, Shio loves you, you idiot. What do you believe would occur if you died? The Namikaze was unable to accept this and yelled, but what about you? You need to restart your clan, find love, and live your entire life. I know that idiot, Sasuke said, his hair covering his eyes as the first tears since his family's death streamed down his cheeks. But how can I find love when the only woman I've ever loved is in love with someone else? Sasuke yelled as the light began to brighten, Oi, take care of her, will you? Naruto couldn't speak as a person he once dismissed as a traitor sacrificed himself. Make her the most happy person on the planet. Will you at least promise me that? Naruto nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. Then I can die in peace, Sasuke said, nodding. Naruto, take care of the world. Naruto was forced to close his eyes as the light became blinding. When the light faded, Naruto opened his eyes to see that it was now morning, and hundreds of shinobi behind him were stirring and waking up as if they had been sleeping, looking around at the rising sun and beginning to celebrate. The horror they had all been subjected to had finally been defeated. Shio approached him, looking out at the sunrise and speaking softly, Sasuke. Naruto felt the powers he had gained from Izanagi bleed out of him, transforming him back into a normal human. He was a hero, Naruto said. That's right, Naruto said, turning to see the 5 cages standing behind them, their eyes shining with gratitude. Minato took a step forward and said, Sasuke will be remembered forever for his heroism. Just like you will, Naruto. I don't deserve any recognition, Naruto said, turning away. Shio slapped him unexpectedly. Don't be a fool, he said. Even if you don't realize it, you are everyone's hero. You triumphed over Izanami and saved the world. Naruto was slightly stunned as he turned to face the crowd of ninjas from all over the world, all chanting and cheering his name, their gratitude washing over him in waves. Shio grasped his cheeks and smiled happily as Naruto slowly smiled and turned around to kiss her. Naruto looked down at her and smiled before leaning down to kiss her. Epilogue. 10 years later. Shio came in and smiled at her husband. Did you finish it? Naruto closed the book he had finished writing and sighed tiredly. Yeah, he said, nodding. Everything seems to have happened yesterday. Shio nodded, I concur. These last few years have been incredibly peaceful. Shio looked fondly down at their two children, Sasuke, Elise, what are you doing? Before they could continue. The boy had black hair like his father but his mother's crystal blue eyes, while his sister has red hair with purple eyes. Elise wanted you to read the story about your childhood again, Dad, Sasuke said sluggishly. You wanted him to read it too. Elise glared at her brother. Immediately, her gaze was drawn to her father. Well, Dad? Will you read it aloud to us? I don't see why not, Naruto said, looking down at the book he had just finished. But instead, let me tell you the whole story. The children sat on the couple's laps as Naruto began reading from the beginning of the book. Naruto coughed once before speaking. There once was a lonely child who lived in the village. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze was his name.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.